You're listening to the Roundtable Podcast with your host, Shogun, and special guest, Mojito.
Thank you, Wolven Rain. Thank you to the live audience and everybody joining me. I am in a public place, so I apologize for any background noise, but it is quite quiet in here. Thank you, Mojito, for joining me for this podcast. Thank you to the live studio audience, and please do check us out on Discord. We are the Roundtable Podcast. You can find us on all social media, on our website, GoFundMe, and Patreon. So, Mojito, today we're going to talk about the Middle East. So if you would like to just introduce your expertise and interest in this area and yourself, and then we'll dive right into it.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Good evening or good day, depending on where you are. I'm Mojito. I'd like to first start off by thanking Shogun for the opportunity and Wolverine for making the introduction. And hello to all the whether live audience or people who will be listening to us later on YouTube. Now, why I wanted to do this particular podcast at this particular moment was because of the entire rise of the Middle Eastern conflict again. It kind of fades away and comes up and goes away within the news. Every couple of months you hear a new something new has happened or something old has come up again. And so I just wanted to shed some perspective on the matter, not really reciting facts, not really having a Fox News or NBC or CBS piece on it, but shedding a new perspective, a new light on the matter from someone who has maybe seen both sides of the conflict and lived through a lot of what has happened in the Middle East. Now, very quick introduction to myself. I was born to an Egyptian father and a French mother. I spent 10 years of my life in Europe, mainly France. And I spent 15 years of my life within the Middle East, mainly in Egypt. So I have been immersed in both cultures, both European and Arabic and Muslim and Egyptian. I have seen both sides of the conflict represented within my family on my father's side and my mother's side. And I have been part of a lot of political controversies within my country. So hopefully my perspective on the matter would be both neutral and informative and insightful to all those concerned with the matter. So I will begin right now after I've introduced myself, by telling you some of the facts, or maybe make a narrative introduction to the Middle Eastern issue, why there's congestion there, what's happening, what has happened, and why, in my humble opinion, this is an issue that is far from being resolved and one that will impact the international scheme for the foreseeable future. Now, the very brief story begins in November 2nd of 1917. Sir Arthur Balfour was a higher up within the British government. He made a promise that is known as the Balfour Promise to the Jews at the time, the Zionist Jews, where he would establish a settlement for Zionist Jews and for Jews, a refugee within Palestine. Palestine was then a British establishment, Britishly controlled at the time after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Now, to define Zionism, it was a nationalist movement created by Jews, maybe in the 18th century, where it has risen, mainly in Eastern Europe. At that particular moment, they had been outcast from the Ottoman Empire. They had a lot of their rights restricted, a lot of their finances were inhibited, a lot of their investments were taken away from them. And so that movement started to reestablish Jews within their homeland, which is Sinai/Palestine, and have a home there and have a Jewish presence there that was taken away throughout the past 2 or 3 decades under the Ottoman Empire. Now, after the Balfour Promise was established, they decided to start moving Jews into the territory then controlled by Britain. A lot of them moved in. It was very peaceful at the time to an extent. They started moving in, buying houses, establishing themselves there. And due to the already present Jews within Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and other areas, the entire thing was, to a lesser extent, well, everything seemed to get along. Everyone seemed to get along for the most part at that particular period. Now, come the Second World War. The Second World War has seen some horrendous atrocities done to the Jews. Some of the worst massacres that mankind has ever seen, some of the most atrocious things that happened to the Jews, especially European Jews in that period. And they found a safe haven within the early 40s and late 30s in Israel, those who succeeded in fleeing there. Now, after they succeeded in fleeing there, they started to establish themselves more and more. There would start to be an entire presence there, which was, for the most part, still not quite problematic because they were seen as refugees there. However, after the end of the war, then started the ordeal. Now, the Jews present within the area, they wanted to establish independence. They wanted to have a separate state from Palestine, and for that state to be recognized by the UN. A lot of back and forth, a lot of nations got involved, and then in 1948, they started to intervene military-wise. They started to, okay, let's do a convention, a UN convention, where we will decide whether this is Palestine, this is something else, this is that, this is this. Led to a lot of armed conflict, which I will not get into, but at the end of the day, by 1952, it had been established, the nation of Israel has established itself, and it was now recognized within the UN, and the presence of Palestine was less and less recognized since it was neither a British state nor was it an independent state. In 1956, it's the whole tension between other nations started when Israel started a war between itself and Egypt for the territory of Sinai. Britain got involved, France got involved, but at the end of the day, USA intervened in order to prevent the conflict, and that was resolved. And Israel did not manage to put a foot in Sinai. They were still secret to their land. In 1967, and here's where it gets interesting, Israel again attempted a full military attack on Egypt. They completely destroyed all of our airports. They completely destroyed all of our military bases and started a full-blown invasion of the peninsula of Sinai. That was in the 5th of June, 1967. That was one of the greatest losses and fastest and swiftest losses in military history. In 12 hours, they completely debilitated a country of 50 million people, completely clawing them in a military sense. And they took the territory, and it was theirs. And they were, of course, supported by the United States in that domain, both military and in UN support. Now, for that period, there was extreme tension in the area because Israel were not seen more of nesters. They were seen as foreign expanders or foreign invaders that have come to this land that they now are claiming it is theirs, and have started to establish themselves, to expand, to take stuff that for them all the people within the area thought it wasn't theirs, basically because this was they were a foreign religion, foreign people. They were European. They did not look like the Middle Easterns. They did not have the same beliefs, and that was the belief at the time. Now, in 1973, the Egyptian military succeeded in one of the greatest military victories ever to retake Sinai and push back the Israelis to their mainland, to Israel again, and to the Palestinian homeland. And it was at that particular moment where Israel established their doctrine of from one part of the ocean to the other, which is the basic goal of the Israeli nation, which is to expand between the two seas, between the Red Sea and between the, I'm not really quite sure what the other one is, but they have this vision of pretty much taking over the entire territory, making it inevitably theirs. And so this situation that's been going on in the Middle East, everyone will have you thinking that it's Iraq, that it's Iran, that it's Oman, that it's Saudi Arabia. And these nations have internal conflicts that are major, absolutely, and that are threatening to the security of the area, definitely. But all of these wars have been local kerfuffles. They have been issues of money. They have been issues of religion. They've never been issues of territory. No country ever wanted to take something that wasn't land from either be it Iraq, Iran, Syria. They never really wanted to expand. They just wanted to establish dominance. However, how Israel is looked at within the area is they are foreign expanders, invaders. What they want to do is come here, take the territory, take the land. They want to expand. And this is how Middle Easterns view Israelis. They are taught from, like I have been to a lot of military school and primary school and taught in the Middle East, they are given the very, very, very ironic picture of, you see this Jewish guy, he is bad. When you go to the mosque there, the speeches that they give are not ones of tolerance. They're ones of, okay, do you know Jews? Jews are bad. You should hate them. You should not be friends with them. You should always refute them. And this is the base of the entire conflict. Israelis think they are entitled to a land, and Muslims of the area and Arabs of the area are born and bred to hate and despise and loathe the Jews in general. Not simply Israelis, not just Zionists. They are taught to despise, distrust everything that is Jewish, and this is the core of the issue here. It's not that the U.S. is supporting them or that the U.K. is supporting this. It is fundamentally a racial/religious hatred that has been inborn within every single person in the Middle East, and that has been fought by Israel for such a long time. Israel is not fighting a war to stay because they're staying on the land. Israel is not fighting a war to expand anymore because they've already expanded. Israel is fighting a war of acceptance. Israel are, how you would say, when people immigrate to a different country and start a small town called Chinatown. When you start Chinatown in New York, you don't really want to make New York the new China. You just want your whole place to settle in and for people to accept you and for people to want, to come to Chinatown and visit it. Unfortunately, if you are born in the U.S. and everything that you hear is China is bad, China is horrible, and then you go to church and you hear Chinese people will go to hell, do not befriend Chinese people, no one that will ever come from China and live there will ever be accepted, will ever be loved, will ever have any form of right for the Middle Eastern people. And herein lies the issue. The issue lies within the inborn hatred, the inborn wanting of acceptance, and the redistribution or non-distribution of land. Now, something that I want to point out here is within every conflict, there is problems or there is, atrocities committed on both sides. And the media is very, deceptive in that area because they will come on Fox News and they will say, well, you have this and that, Palestinians bomb the Israeli maybe sovereignty, and then you'll get another. Al Jazeera will tell you, well, Israelis bombed an entire Palestinian village, and it's merely a trouble or a problem that is completely made up by the media to further an agenda where people are dying every single day. Yes, of course, the Israeli army kills people. Of course, Palestine has a lot of terrorist groups that are killing or that are hurting a lot of Israeli institutions. But then you tend to look at it further, and then you see, well, this is a Cold War that is happening, and there's not really any progress. Then you start looking at the surrounding area. You start looking at the Syrias and the Iraqs, and you start looking from the beginning of the 21st century, what has happened in the area. Now, of course, September 11th happened, and there was this wave of anti-terrorist / anti-Islam where, okay, these people are not cool, guys. These people, they just want to blow us up. They hate the American way of life. They hate the Western way of life. Let's handle this. Now, George Bush decided in 2003, in March of 2003, to deploy his troops and go into this area. And now you created a much, much bigger issue wherein in a land that had a single identity for maybe 1,300 years, you introduced not only one newer one, was the Zionist Jews and the state of Israel. You introduced the U.S. military. You introduced the U.S. military in a very critical time where tensions were at their highest and where the entire world had an anti-Muslim / anti-Arab / terrorist view of life, whereas we wanted to control these people. We wanted to make sure what their intentions were, wanted to stop them from prospering and progressing as much as we can. and then they came in and they invaded Iraq, destabilizing the area even more, and giving Israel a form of false hope. Whereas, okay, the U.S. is on the right, we have people who help us on the left, and well, at the end of this particular area, we will maybe expand, maybe have our way, maybe we'll reach our ultimate goal of taking Sinai. Now, that did not happen because what the U.S. ended up coming for was simply oil. They didn't want to stop terrorism. They didn't want to stop the atrocities that were made by Saddam Hussein, who was an extremely vicious individual. They only wanted the oil. And they got what they wanted from Iraq and then withdrew, leaving an area stable than ever. You had one of the major players in demise. You have an Israeli nation that is developing its army for an attack on any nation at any time. And you had another one in Syria where the Arab Spring was beginning. And this takes us to the beginning of the 2010, 2011, where the Arab Spring started and the revolutions and all of the major players, Egypt, Syria, they wanted to overthrow their leaders, their oppressive leaders, in order to replace them with newer, more progressive, more democratic ones, which ended up happening in 2011 in most of the nations. However, Syria was left not even rubble. It was less than rubble. It was nothing. For the past 9 to 10 years, there has been a civil war going on there of magnanimous proportions, and Syria is not just a civil war that's been going on there, because it progressed into something more, because the U.S. found okay, this area now has been more volatile and more toxic than ever. We want to protect first our investment there, and second, we want to protect Israel, which is part of our investment there, and then third, we want to have a say in the area, even though the U.S. has absolutely nothing to do with this. And now, even though the U.S. was the only benefactor, was the only major player in this game at this point, Russia started to intervene and said, okay, now we have a very unstable region, a region that is just pretty much left there for the taking. All we have to do is just get our foot there. And then Russia started to authorize military action in Syria. Now, every person will go to the news, Putin, Trump, and they will say, well, we have the interests of the Syrians in mind. Well, in actuality, that is not correct. This is just a chess move where they're placing their armies, placing their dominance within the area in the hopes that within the next 10, 20 years, they can establish ghost nations or establish territories of themselves within the area, further establishing the Israeli nation and, of course, having an oversight or a control over whatever happens in a very essential part of the world. And now, at the end of this, there comes the foundation of ISIS, a huge military group that is, well, mainly funded by the West, that was, for its main purpose, was, well, creating a nation to, prevent the Zionist regime and prevent the Western invasion. But in actuality, is nothing more than a very, very well-funded terrorist organization that is just has one of its main intentions is not only to provoke hostile military action from other people, such as the UN, but just to disfigure the area and the image as a whole. And what you are left with is an extremely, extremely unstable area of 6 or 7 countries. 2 of them are in complete rubble. 2 of them don't even exist anymore. You have Israel, which is just waiting to attack at any moment. And you have 2 major nations, the US and Russia, within Syria, fighting over control, fighting over bragging rights. And a fourth nation, which is Turkey, to just want to, come in here and just, okay, we'll try and establish anything. We'll try and maybe reinvigorate the Ottoman Empire, and a whole new doctrine, a whole new way of thinking of this conflict. And this brings us to 2019. Well, not 2019, early 2020, where Trump is, well, okay, guys, you see this entire congested situation. You see those 3 religions fighting, 5 nations fighting. I'm going to just put a simple solution. I'm not going to even invite anyone from that area. We don't like these people. I'm just going to get these people here, get these, Um, sorry about that, squad. Get these Israelis. I'm going to get into put forth a proposition. This proposition will be one that I will not include any other nation that is part of this entire conversation. I will not include them. There will be nothing for me. I will just simply put this motion, put this plan. You will all have to accept it. You all have to accept this plan, even though he did not consult anyone. And by this, I will stabilize the entire thing. Now, what he did in actuality was force a plan on 4 different nations, which only 2 of them accept, and he completely destroyed his government's safety and security and credentials within the area, leading to a more than ever destabilized region, leading to maybe cutting of a lot of U.S. benefactories within the area, cutting off a lot of the import and export lines, losing a lot of political allies, and finally, not only hurting the Israeli country, not only hurting their benefits, they're not only hurting the, but maybe to an extent, starting another more atrocious war in the very near future between a lot of militaries. And this is very, very scary to anyone who is not only living in that to participate, wanting to go there in the near future. It's made it a very, very hostile area, a very toxic area, somewhere where nobody would want to live, spend their life. Nobody would want to, everybody would just want to immigrate from. And well, with this all new immigration laws, you will just not wanting these people want to flee this congested area, this dark area at this time, and you're just creating an inner conflict, a conflict that is beyond resolution, that is getting worse and worse every day. That is, at the end of the day, something that is not going to resolve itself. You're definitely not going to resolve it, and will only end with the ending of the interference from outside with the entire situation. Now, I have had my say. I know that I've been long. Maybe some of this was a bit too informational. Some of it might have been quite boring. But I think it was very important to give you a point of view of what is happening, what will happen within the near future, and maybe shed some light or perspective on the entire issue from a different point of view. Thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions and rebuttals, I will be more than glad to answer them.
I'd just like to say thank you for that analysis and that breakdown. Obviously very in-depth, very well informed. At this point, anyone is open to speak up if they want to. However, if not, I think you and I will just go back and forth. So first of all, is there any questions from the audience for Mr. Mojito? Okay. So I'm going to have to re-listen to that whole analysis you gave me to make sure I understand it. So I'm now going to ask a series of questions that you may feel have already been answered, and I admit that may be the case, so bear with me. But Can you give us the breakdown of the main geopolitical flashpoints in the Middle East? Who are the antagonists and protagonists of the most hotly contested borders or relationships, right? We know there's Israel and Iran, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so who would be the most heated rivalries of nation states in this region?
Yes, definitely. Well, of course, within the entire list of the all main players, yes. But for the main players, I would say that the Middle East now, as for the Trump proposition, is a very hot zone for 4 nations, which are Palestine, Israel, Egypt, and Syria, because these are the 4 countries that share a border with each other. Now, the whole problem was the division of the border, where Israel began, where it stopped, where Syria began, where it ended, where Palestine began, and Egypt as well. This is the entire dilemma. This is where, okay, who's going to stay here, who's here, and who's there? And this is what creates the entire conflict. Now, the whole Iran situation, what people don't understand it, it's not really a Middle Eastern problem. It's a East versus West. It's Iran versus America. Iran doesn't really have any issue with anyone besides from the U.S. Even with Israel, they just hate Israel by extent, because America has they view it as a counter nation. They just view it as the opposite to us, as the people we do not want to be or we cannot be. So we just have to hate them. We have to attack them. We have to hurt them in any way, shape, or form. So Iran has always been an outcast from the conflict. Not really an outcast, but a third party. They were never really involved with anything. Nobody really hurt Iran. Nobody really attacked them. Nobody really wanted to start anything with them, aside from, well, Saudi Arabia. But that was very, very recent. That did not extend for the past 50 or 60 years. That was just something very recent that they got in the middle. And then they started making the nuclear weapons. And of course, Iran seemed to be a very big threat. Iran seemed to be very provocative. Iran seemed to be the media-made villains of the entire matter. However, they are not, even though they might seem the biggest problem right now, Iran are very, very, very incapable of doing anything. They are very paralyzed because they do not have the support of anyone. They are a nation without help. They are just some individuals. I'm not completely aware of how many people are in Iran, but they are very, very small in number with no support from anyone, and they just talk big shit, right? They just have big mouths. They are very loud people. They are very, 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 even though, of course, the rebuttal will be, well, they have nuclear weapons. They're going to use them, and they are very dangerous. They have bombings. They have so-and-so. Let me remind you that Pakistan has nuclear weapons. They have more nuclear weapons than Iran, and they are much more ready to fire them in Iran. However, nuclear weapons have always been a who has the dick, if you'll excuse my French competition. America has been increasing their number of warheads, so has Russia, but they are both very sane to know that they will not be using all these nuclear weapons. They're just two guys in a locker room saying who has the biggest dick. Of course, everybody wants to have the biggest dick, but nobody will, when it comes to crunch time, will actually fuck the other dude because, well, that would be not cool, guys. And this is the exact situation that's happening with Iran. There are a bunch of people with a lot of big mouths, with a lot of hatred, with a lot of pent-up aggressions because they've always been the minor players. And as much as the media wants you to think that they are the major players in this game, they are not. And this is what I think my whole arguments or what I wanted to say was about. Even though they are portrayed as this, the major players in this game are Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Palestine. They are the ones who are in risk of destabilizing the entire thing because Egypt holds control over the Suez Canal, which is pretty much the naval connection between the East and the West. They hold control of the Sinai, which is the highly contested area for Israel and Palestine. Syria are the people who are now in control of the Golan and in control of a lot of the eastern entry to the Middle East. And these are the areas that the US and Russia want to control. These are the areas that everybody wants to intervene in, even now Turkey, if you hear in the news, are wanting to intervene with that area. But my final thing is that to answer Shogun's question, Iran, even though they are portrayed as the big bad villains, even though they talk a lot of shit, even though they say we have this, we have that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, Iran are the least threatening to the American way of life. They're the least threatening to the West because they won't do anything and because they are small people who have big mouths. Okay. And that is just what I wanted to clear up.
Mojito, one quick thing. You said something before that there was nobody really cared about Iran and all this thing. Back in the 80s, Iraq and Iran had a pretty big...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But the or docile wars between the purpose of these wars was the fight between the Sunnis and the Shiites. It was a pure religious...
That is completely... No, that's wrong.
I am sorry, my friend, but I believe that I'm correct in this.
I believe you're wrong.
So, Tiny, not to interrupt during regular chat. Certainly don't interrupt during a recorded podcast. So if you disagree, allow him to make his entire case, and then you make your entire case, okay? So did you want to explain why this is... Explain your position on this, please, Mojito, and then we'll allow Tiny Cactus to explain his disagreement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, the Tiny Cactus's thing is that, of course, Iran has had with Saudi Arabia, with Iraq, as he mentioned, in the 80s. All these conflicts, need I explain to you? Of course, the media would explain them as the Iraq or Iran versus Saddam, or Iraq versus the the Iranian way of life or some form of Muslim. But however, what I would like to really explain is, as someone, again, who my grandfather was a member, a high-ranking officer within the Egyptian military, so I have pretty good insight about what happened during the 80s. And I have been part of a lot of discussions with a lot of people from these nationalities with a lot of different explanations. And what I really want to make clear is these wars, even though you may find the evidence and find the media and find the coverage, everything in the Middle East is basically revolving around religion. And this is why every war is fought. This is why every single individual fights with another person from another country. It's because of their belief. Even though this territory is majority Muslims, in Iraq and in Iran, they have the minority of called the Shiites. Shiites are a minority of Islam, maybe 10% or less of all Muslims within the world. They reside mostly in Iran and part of them in Iraq. There have been a lot of tensions within both nations because of the differences within these beliefs. And any conflict that happened within that period, and that is happening right now between Saudi Arabia and Iran and between the other Middle Eastern countries, is because of their extreme Shiite beliefs and is because of religions. Now, of course, you may rebut this, and I will give you completely the floor to do so, but I really want to make this clear from my point of view and from my expertise and from my view on the matter, that these are why these wars have been fought. Now, go ahead.
Okay, the Iran-Iraq war was not because of religious dispute. It was because of territorial disputes. The Iraqi, I don't remember the exact. I think it was a river actually, but it wasn't religious at all. It was a land dispute. Okay, so it's territorial dispute. It wasn't anything to do with religion at that point. You could say religion influenced because Saddam saw the threat of the recently developed Islamic regime over in because they threw over the Shah, and Saddam was afraid that was maybe going to happen in Iraq. But it was the main base for the war was a land dispute, not religious at all. That was
Again, what you said was completely true. Yes, it was mainly due to land and stopping any form of advancement from both sides in land. But the land disputes was not over really Iran taking over the entire thing, but the Shiites expanding. So yeah, I'm not opposing your point that it was a form of progression. But as I said, with the progression of Israel within the area, the problem that all the people have is not really with Israel moving forward or coming to Sinai. Well, that would be no problem to anyone. Or Israel moving forward and taking over Jerusalem. That's no problem of Israel taking over the control of Jerusalem. That does not concern anyone. It's just, okay, a government that takes over. It's the Jewish people that are taking over Jerusalem that house the Middle Eastern people's pennies in a twist. It's the entire religion that controls the area. That's the problem with the entire region.
Also, you said before that Iran was very small. You realize Iran has a population of 81 million.
I did, yes, of course. Iran is not a small country either. As what I mentioned, on the global scale, as players within the global conflict, Iran are small within. They have a very, very minute influence over everything that is happening simply because they do not have the backing. Now, Egypt is a country of 100 million individuals, so only slightly larger. However, the backing of Egypt is very heavily linked with all the other countries. We have excellent relations with both the U.S., with Russia, with Turkey. We have a much, much larger military. We have, let me say, a very, very larger presence on the dominant scale, even though there's a very minute difference between the population. So what I meant was it's not a small country in terms of size or in terms of population, but on the global scale, they are the jacked guy who has not lifted for a while, who's just been juicing for the past year, who hasn't really gone through the ranks, who hasn't really done the work and just started going to bodybuilding competitions. He is jacked. He does have the weaponry. He is someone who we should take notice of because, well, he's a big guy. He's a 300-pound, 6'8" person. So we should take care of him, yes. But there are a lot of individuals who are 6'4", 6'5", 250 pounds who have been lifting for a lot of time. These guys are much more dangerous. They are much more experienced. They are much more established on the scene, and they are much more capable of doing damage and really affecting the scale. So, Cactus, is there anything else you would like to add? Or...
No, not really.
So can I ask you another question then, Mojito?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Can you comment on the significance and importance of Saudi Arabia in the Middle East? What is their line and rivals, and what role does they play in the region for ill?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, because Shogun was cutting off a bit, I'm going to repeat his question. His question was the role of Saudi Arabia in this entire situation. Well, here's the thing with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is named after the House of Saud. So if it were to translate into a Western name for a country, it would be, for England, for example, it would be Windsor's land. So Saudi Arabia is not really a state. It's the property of the House of Saud, the ruling house. Now the head of that ruling house is MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. He is the player. He is the head of that family right now. And what we need to understand is this land is not really a democratic or has any form of elected Senate or elected states representative. It is their land. It has their name. It has their motto. Everyone there is pretty much theirs. This is not really a nation for the people or a people's nation. It is the nation of that house. They own it. They own everything and everyone in it. So everything that they do is pretty much trying to establish their house and their land. They don't want anything more because they control Mecca. And Mecca is pretty much the Muslim safe haven. It's the Vatican. It's the Jerusalem. Mecca is Mecca. And they control it. So they do not need any more power or control over the region. They're not after anything. They have the money. They own oil, basically. They own Mecca. They own pretty much Islam. And they don't really want anything more. Saudi Arabia, they are very self-sufficient. What they did want is to stop Iran and stop Oman from establishing a bigger role within the area. They never wanted Oman or Iran to have bigger roles within the Middle Eastern conflict because they have very, very big mouths and they're very small players within the role. Now, even though Egypt is much less wealthy than these countries, Saudi Arabia and Egypt are the big players. They've been around for the longest while, so they're allowed to speak. They pretty much enable each other, and they try and silence the other noises because they are very young, they are very informed, they are very, let me say, young. And so what I did want to say is, Saudi Arabia, as big as they are and as influential as they are, they're not after any form of expansion or imposition of anything. They just want to keep the status quo. They just want to stop everyone from intervening and just, guys, let's chill. Let's keep everything the way it is. We don't want anyone coming in, trying to intervene with our land because it's not the people's land. It's our money. It's our oil. It's our Mecca. It's our everything. And this is pretty much Saudi Arabia. There are people who own the land and do not want any disturbance around them. They want peace around them, and they just want the big boys to talk. They don't want any of the small boys.
Okay, thank you. So I know you've already covered this directly or indirectly, but can you just give us a breakdown in the same way of Israel, their position, their alignments, their relationships, enemies, and role in that region? I know you've already covered it, but at the same time, just an analysis specifically.
Absolutely, yeah. For Israel specifically, what I would put is, they are a nation that has its main goal of expansion. They want to take Sinai, establish a Jewish presence there, and to establish the Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Their allies have always been and will always be the United States of America because American Jews have been influencing the financial market and Wall Street for the past, I don't know how many years. And so all the politicians, they at some point have to make some form of concession towards Israel, not because of their love for Israel, not because of their love for the cause, but because their hands have always been twisted by the donations from the Jewish lawmakers or the Jewish Wall Street people who have the money to control politics, to control decisions in the area. So Israel, as even though they are not the biggest in terms of population, and they never were, even though they do not have the largest military within the area or the most dangerous, they don't have the numbers or maybe the equipment. They have the complete 100% unwavering support of the United States ever since their establishment. And every government from the United States has been pro-Israel and will be pro-Israel for the foreseeable future. And so this is why Israel is not going away anytime soon and will only be expanded, because you can have all of these nations going against it. You can have an Arab coalition that goes, okay, we don't want these people here, even though that is wrong, but we don't want these people here. You will never settle for these people here. But then the U.S. will come down and say, well, these guys are going to be here. And they're going to say, okay, no, we don't want them here. Then the U.S. is going to, say we're going to deploy our troops here, and you're not going to attack our troops, because if you do, that'll be a declaration of war. And so America has the biggest dick in the world right now, and they're willing to pull it out at any time for Israel, and they have. And this is why Israel is an untouchable nation in an area where they are very, very hated. It's because they are, how would you say, the principal son in a classroom where they're not really liked. No one can touch them because they have America's dick behind them.
Thank you. So, what do you think about Trump's new peace deal that was rejected by the Arab League, I think only today? What was the implications of this diplomatic failure, if that's what it is? And what are the diplomatic solutions that are on the table? How does this look now? Like, where are we and where is it going from here?
Well, I think that such plans that Trump has made have been trying to put forth. It's a plan. It's a map. He's pretty much made a new map. He's made a new vision for how the area should be sorted out. He consulted only with Israel. He did not consult any of the major players within the area. And so he will try and establish his vision. The UN is going to contest, and the US is going to say, well, you're going to contest me with, and they're going to say, well, we don't have an army. And Trump is going to say, well, I have. And that's why he made this entire move, because he says, well, nobody can oppose me at this particular moment. Nobody's going to oppose my decision or anything I want to do in this area, because I am Trump. I have the biggest military, and I'm not afraid to do or say anything, as he's proven to say. So he's proposed a solution. The solution is extremely hated by everyone. It will be suggested to the UN. The UN is going to oppose. And eventually, over time, his vision will be the de facto reality that the Palestinians and Israelis will have to accept over time. There will be a lot of uprisings. There will be riots. There will be violence, as was for every single decision that the U.S. has made towards this, towards a better Palestine. But eventually, Trump's vision will be the de facto reality, and much to the dismay of everyone but the U.S., this will unfortunately go through.
Well, this has certainly been a great breakdown on the Middle East. I'm going to need to listen to it all again to take in all this information. So how would you rate, on a scale of 1 to 10, or just in your own assessment, the current heat level of the Middle East? Is it cooling down? Is it heating up? Are we going to see insurgencies, terrorism, bombings, and even warfare, nation-state level? Or is this going to stabilize? How is it getting better or worse?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the congestion has pretty much shifted now, because we've been seeing in the news for the past maybe 2 or 3 months that it's been all Iran versus America. And now this has really dwindled, because America pulled out its stick, and Iran, are pretty much afraid at the moment, even though they have a big mouth and they say and they will and will do that and this. But for the congestion and the true problems that are going to occur are going to happen within Palestine. Palestine right now is a war zone. It is a red hot chili pepper that is going to erupt. There will be violence there. There will be bloodshed there. There will be tears. There will be dead. There will be casualties on both sides, in Israel and in Palestine. And even though it might take years for Trump's vision to turn to reality, Egypt is pretty stable. Syria is now, while it's improving, it's still a war zone. Nobody wants to go there. But even though these major players have been pretty much stabilizing for the past area, even though ISIS is being fought from Libya and being fought from Egypt and being fought on a lot of fronts, Palestine now, Trump has pretty much led a match within a very gaseous area. It wasn't its time, it wasn't its place, but this match will unfortunately have casualties within Palestine, within Israel, but will not really affect the West within the upcoming or forthcoming period.
Thank you. So I also need to ask at least one more question, which is, what is the role of Russia in the Middle East? We've heard that Russia played a major role in the Syrian diplomatic effort. Russia, I've read some headlines that said something along the lines of Trump hands Putin the Middle East on a silver platter. There seems to be buzz in the intelligence community and the geopolitical analysis community that Russia has made major gains in the Middle East, and America has sort of withdrawn its hegemony from this region, and that Russia is sort of settling in as the new superpower administrator or whatever, hegemon of the Middle East. So can you just speak a little bit about Putin's role, Russia's role, and what this changes?
Absolutely. Well, after the withdrawal of the U.S., the sequential withdrawal from Iraq, it left a power void within the area, especially with the Syrian government and military losing power, and the U.S. not really wanting to intervene within the entire Syria situation at first. A big power vacuum was left in the area, and Russia wanted to capitalize because they knew that if they had a foot within the region, it would really help establish them as a global force. It would really help have a dialogue open with the U.S. about territory, about what we can do there, and it will help establish also their favorable relations with Egypt, with Syria, with Iraq. And that's what Putin's been leading up to. He's not really, because all the Western nations don't really want to help the Syrians. They don't want to really have any UN-like beneficiary action towards them. All they want to do is establish a foothold within the area. If you dominate the Middle East, if a nation, be China, Russia, or the US, manage to have control over this area, they will be the next superpower, because they will control the oil, they will control religion, and they will control the vast resources that this area has. So any country with a foothold in that place is a very powerful player in the political standpoint. And that's why Russia has been gaining territory, gaining allies within the area, just so they can have their foothold, establish their dominance, and control maybe Turkey, control the Ukraine from that point, establish military bases. And the growing presence of Russia within this area will definitely annoy the US and help the Russian cause.
Well, this is great information, a lot of great angles. I'm not sure if I have other specific questions. I guess my last question specifically would be, is this Iran issue essentially over for now? Have we passed the critical period where America and Iran looked like they might be about to go to war, and now things are going to stabilize and cool down? Or is this going to somehow flare up again, either in the near or medium future?
Unfortunately, even though I suggested that even Iran has been that, the match that Trump sparked, I think, will reignite the big mouths of Iran. They will reignite the entire religious issue, and Iran will have a bigger mouth. They will go to the UN, they will rebut, they will this, they will that. Their mouths are going to grow even larger, and they will have a much bigger voice and a bigger rebuttal. But what I want to really clarify is Iran are too weak on the political standpoint to do anything. Iran's mouths will keep getting larger. They will keep making threats, and that is what they do, what they will do. But if there's one thing that people should take away from this podcast, is Iran do not have the support of anyone on the global scale, and that is why they will never, ever really make something of great significance, of damage to the Western civilization at least, because they do not have allies. They are big mouths. They will only speak. They will not hurt you. They will not damage you. They will only hurt themselves on the global scale and maybe neighboring areas. But that's just, the Middle East problem to sort out, and no one else's.
Okay, well, thanks so much. I'm going to just give you one last platform here. Is there any other message you want to get out, any other aspect you want to cover before we wrap up an excellent podcast?
Well, no, I just want to thank everyone who is here. I want to listen to the podcast. Thank you, Shogun, for the platform. Thank you to the roundtable. And I'm sorry that some parts of this were, I realized, boring, but I thought that for a lot of the Western community, they needed to hear this particular perspective of someone who has lived in the area, who has had family members, who has had military experience within the area, to shed his light, to maybe make some points, to maybe explain something that the Western media will definitely not maybe have the force, the insight, or have the will to share with everyone. So, there you go. Thank you again, everyone. And hopefully I have said the insight that I wanted to do, and I was not too long within that period. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much to our live audience. Thank you to our recorder, Makina. Thank you to our special guest, Mojito. More than happy to do more episodes at any time you wish. Please do check out the Roundtable Discord server on Discord. You can find us through the conspiracy section of the Discord. You can search the Roundtable Discord on Google. You'll find us. You can check us out on our website, GoFundMe, Patreon, Tumblr, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. And keep an eye out for us on Podcast Addict and Podbean. We've got about 12 podcasts recorded coming down the pipe as soon as they're all edited and finished up. So please do stay in touch with us. And best of all, join us here where the party is. That being said, hello, my friend Tech. Sorry I didn't move you down before, but you can hear this one when it's recorded. So thank you, everybody. We'll catch you actually only in 2 hours when we're going to have another podcast between NSA and Soul Diver, the much anticipated showdown between the two different disinfo psyops camps vis-a-vis aliens, UFOs, angels, and demons. So don't miss that one in the special events channel at 5 Central. That being said, let's jump down to the round table for open discussion.